morning, everyone. We'll be starting our third session of our training program on the design implementation of family farming registry. I'd like to thank once again for your time, for your interest in joining our sessions, not only these opportunities, but also all the virtual opportunities from this session in our platform. Before we start, some of housekeeping as to questions and as well as on the methodology used. For these virtual sessions, you can always send your questions, or you can use the Q&A pod at the bottom of the page so that you can ask all your questions. And with Fernando, we will be addressing those questions like we did in the last session. So we will always have, throughout the process, the opportunity to ask questions, either live or answering your questions if you post them in the Q&A pod. We are working on 3 languages, Spanish, English, and French. So you can always ask questions in those 3 languages so that we can reply them. And if we cannot answer the questions, last session, I believe there were 3 or 4 questions that went unanswered. We'll always have the opportunity in the virtual forum in the platform so that we can establish a dialogue. On the asynchronic exercises on the platform, please send those exercises through the platform. We've received some of those exercises over the email. We are going through them still, but it's important to have them on the platform because that's the main tool to promote dialogue and to build on these opportunities. We'll always leave 2 weeks between the sessions. In September, we'll have, after September, we'll have a regional exercises. So it's important to populate this platform. And again, if you have questions on the content, the forum is there. We have Fernando and all the team so as to have a dialogue, so as to engage not only between you and us, but also all the attendees. And now we will be uploading all the recordings of the previous sessions for each unit, again, in the platform. So if you have questions or let us know, but again, the platform is our main channel to discuss different topics and remember that using the platform for homeworks, it's one of the requirements for approval. The next session will be a regional session. We are grouping the participants as a function of their geographies. Now on, we'll be having a more direct contact supported by Procasur and us through the platform and through the contact information you have shared with us. We have had global sessions, but we have a regional component, which will mean some homeworks and we have interaction through the forum. But again, we will be sharing the information next week and how the different teams are being put together. So once again, If you have questions, let us know. And please try to engage with us through the platform so that we can make the best out of those tools, as well as to leverage the contributions from colleagues from multiple countries and through their ideas and thoughts. So once again, I'd like to thank you for your time and your interest. So let me ask Fernando Sganga so we can start with the contents and have a good session, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Hope you are doing okay. It's a bit cold here, probably a bit warmer up there. I'll be sharing my screen. How about there? Like we said, the unit today, after review, is working on the construction of the registries. How we do that, what elements are to be taken into consideration, how we planning the process. That's the core of the activity for today. And like we said, we'll have a review of what we've done in the previous sessions. I'd like to thank for your homeworks. It's been a good process, very fruitful process. So these content review will consider some of the things you have included in your homeworks. And then we'll look at the necessary conditions. What is that we need to take into account in advance? I mean, before designing our family farming registries. We'll review the basic requirements and needs to be considered. We will see the design and the planning, diagnosis and the definition of registries, the conceptual design process, the operational design process, and we will also review some of successful success stories. Remember that this is an experience in the southern region, in South America, in the southern cone. Over 20 years of work at the regional level and specialized meeting of family farming. So we'll discuss what happened in Argentina. We have Fernando there, which is one of the persons responsible for this, in Brazil, one of the it's some sort of a benchmark, Uruguay and Paraguay. Okay. So, what are we? So how are we understanding the course content so far? Let me read this with you. This is one of the conclusions in the previous sessions. Family farming registries are a type of administrative registry designed to identify the different subjects of family farming for the purpose of implementing public policies and potentially planning various instruments. This conclusion, or this definition, was built through the publication work, which is the foundation of the course. It's English, but it's also a summary in Spanish and French. And then the other important is that in order to identify and classify family farmers, it is essential to have a regulatory framework that defines the criteria being recognized as such, as well as procedures that establish the corresponding institutional structure and operations. This has been developed, as I said, through the exercises. I was surprised from different countries that they have a very good quality criteria, but in several places there is no regulations, or that the concept is not has not yet been adopted.
This will be a topic that we will be working on because it's important to focus on the region. Clearly, South America and Latin America has worked on a deeper aspect in this field. Central America, for instance, they have consolidated some standards, and that's important to be able to look at and problematize it too, to see how we can increase the depth of those registries. And then we've talked about the operational criteria that we need to have. That's something that we looked at. And the criteria, for instance, management, production, all the productive resources, labor, territorial ties, all these criteria are established operationally in different variables. When we talk about production resources that have to do with land, we look at the size of the farm. But what's important is that if we need to understand the difference between criterion and variable, this is something that is at the core of an operational definition. Otherwise, it's difficult to work with a register. The criterion is a political conceptual definition that then becomes concrete in certain actions that are deployed. But it needs to be measured when the variable is assigned. The size of the farm could, of course, have to do with the measurement of the land resource limited to the capacity of the family uh, farmers. And then the size of the farm can also be measured from a physical surface perspective, and also the capacity or the number of livestock that they have. And also we have to see what variable we can look at for the tie to the land. And that could be a variable of distance or how near the production site is to the operation, or whether it's in the same location, in the same district, or the same province. It depends on how lax that definition is. And then we can have magnitudes assigned to that. For instance, if we're talking about the distance of the production unit, we have to see whether we will measure that in kilometers or in time. We need to have a magnitude, a maximum magnitude of this situation. For instance, if we're talking about the size of the the farm site, you have said that in Africa, the maximum surface is 2 hectares. That could be one way to measure it. Or the ratio between labor, the contracted labor, and the family farmers. And that can now actually give us a variable, a magnitude that we can use to measure the size. And all of this should be enclosed in a standard that tells me whether a product is a family farming product or not. When we talk about this, in most of the work that's been done to identify clearly the subjects and families and production units, and what we saw is someone who would be subject to these standards, was a very interesting experience. And then to get to the register, which is what we are discussing, We will have specific elements to be able to collect the information for the register. We will have a form for collecting the data, and that form has to gather information and variables that are defined in the operational definition that needs, of course, criteria and variables and magnitudes that are very clear. And that's the information that this form should collect. And it should also look at variables that we can gather from other registries to be able to control the information that we have. And we also need other types of standards that could be within the same set of standards, or it could be a separate chapter that includes all the information that we need. This must all be uh, planned precisely before we actually set the conditions for the registry. And for this, what's essential for the efficient development and efficient development from a logistic point of view of the registry is a set of institutional conditions. We will look at those more closely, but what's important is to have now maybe 5 minutes for Q&A if there are any questions. Pedro, I don't know if there are any questions in the
No,
chat.
por ahora sin preguntas, pero igual si alguien quiere hacer
No, no questions yet.
alguna consulta, se puede usar
However, if
el
anyone
botón de
wishes to
alzar
ask
la mano
anything,
y
you
nosotros
could
le habilitamos el
actually
micrófono.
use the
Ahí
raise
en el chat
hand
preguntan, capaz
icon
que no entendieron
and
eso.
we can enable the microphone.
No,
There's a
no son preguntas, son
question
comentarios. Solo comentarios.
Q&A
Perfecto.
chat, but
Hay una
also,
pregunta
well,
de
there's
Sherilyn
only have comments. We have a
Molina.
question by
Estás
Sherling
habilitada a hablar, es
Molina.
solo abrir el
You
micrófono.
are enabled to speak. You just need to unmute your mic.
Hola, buenos días.
Hello, good
Buenos
morning.
días, te escuchamos bien.
Me
Good morning, we can hear you loud and
soy de
clear.
Costa Rica, tengo
I'm from Costa
16
Rica.
años
I am 16
y
years old.
represento la juventud
I
y
represent
y a la Junta Nacional de Ferias
the
del
youth,
Sector de
a
la Junta
National
Nacional
Association of
y somos parte de la
Farmers,
agricultura familiar.
and we're part of family
Estas
farming.
reuniones anteriores no había asistido
In
porque
previous meetings, I was not
yo
able to
estudio
attend because I study,
y se me complica mucho la hora, entonces no pude
and so
asistir
it was
y
difficult for
también se me
me
había
to
dañado
attend.
el celular.
And besides that, there's a problem with my cell phone.
Creo que vas
Muchas
a poder
gracias, Sherilyn. Ahí podemos compartir contigo todo el contenido que se
Okay,
ha
thank you, Sherlyn.
presentado
We
y
can share all
también
the
por la
content
plataforma
that we
del
have
curso. Te
presented,
reenviaremos el
and also on
enlace.
the website of the
Puedes
course.
acceder a todas las
We will
preguntas,
send you a
tareas,
link
todos
so you
los
can
temas
access all the
hicimos hasta ahora.
questions and
Y sea bienvenida.
tasks that were
Las tareas
performed.
yo las
So
completé.
you're welcome to that. Well, I have
Perfecto.
done all that,
Buenísimo.
all
Por
the
ahí vamos a seguir
tasks that
avanzando.
were
Una pregunta,
assigned. One
mi
question.
hermana también está contra la Junta, entonces no sé si se puede
My sister
presentar
is
por
also
este
part
medio,
of
es que se me
this
complica mucho para
association,
descargar
so
la
I don't know if
aplicación,
she
para
could
conectarme
introduce herself
por medio de mi teléfono.
through this means. It was
Pero
difficult for me
yo me
to
podría presentar aquí
download
por
the
medio
app
del teléfono
in
de mi
my
hermana.
phone, but maybe I
Nosotros tenemos
can
después, Sherlyn
actually
y hermana,
use my sister's
mandamos un
mobile
correo a
phone.
ustedes y
Well,
y
Cheryl
nos comunicamos
and your
directamente por
sister,
este
we
medio.
will
Ahora
send
ese
you
espacio
an
para dudas y consultas
email to
respecto
you, but this
al
is
contenido técnico.
a space, a
Perfecto,
time
muchísimas
for
gracias.
Q&A
Gracias a ustedes.
regarding the technical content
Adelante,
of
Fernando.
this presentation. Okay, thank you.
Bueno, agradezco igual. Bien. Bueno, seguimos adelante. Este concepto quiero
Okay, we will move
reforzarlo.
on. This is the concept that
Todos
I would like
eh,
to
es
stress.
fundamental para el desarrollo de estos registros eficiente y
What's
eficaz
essential for the
que citan
efficient and
este
effective
conjunto de
development of
condiciones técnicas,
registries is to
financieras
have a
y
set
políticas para el
of
desarrollo.
institutional, technical, financial, and
Y
political
vamos a empezar a
conditions,
detallar un poquito estas.
and we'll begin to break those down.
¿Cuáles son estas condiciones? Bueno,
So
el
what
primer elemento
do
que
these
quiero poner
entail?
arriba de la mesa
The
es
first
el tema del
one that I would like to point
convencimiento
out
y la
is
concertación de acuerdos iniciales
the
a nivel
persuasion and
de los titulares
conclusion
de los
on initial
organismos
agreements
de la
with
administración.
those who are the head of the different organizations, so that they are aware of the benefits that they can get and that they allocate or appoint the right people. This is the political framework. Without the political framework, what we're talking about here is the will of the public administration bodies to have these registers and to be aware that they can get benefits from this, and for them to have the will to set standards that result from technical work, and this is something that is essential. And for that, we have put together guidelines to show decision makers that the registries will be beneficial for public management. This is part of the process that we are proposing. Another essential element is to define the governance so that a body from the public sector is assigned the power to regulate and to oversee the management of the registries. And here I would like to be very clear. We know that in this part of the world, in Latin America, what we do to fund these projects is to come up with a project, and those projects involve external debt. But these projects come to an end, and so we need for an institutional structure to be consolidated so that this is done within the institutional structure of the government, so that it has a permanent institutional governance that will stay in place when the project is over. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to carry out a project if we can't have a continuity of the actions that are deployed. Another tip that we also pointed out, which has been evident, especially in the experience in the Southern Cone, is that if we don't at least tie this to a strong public policy, that is something that is enforceable, the registry won't work. There will be no interest in actually being part of the registry, because what we have seen is that most of the registries are voluntary. They are mandatory for some, for access to some public policies, and sometimes as a driver to get people to register. If I distribute kits and funding and loans, but I don't make this any type of policy that is binding to those registries, that is a fatal mistake, because the registries can actually help me to make this a binding type of process and can give me feedback. So it's key to actually tie them to some sort of public policy, otherwise it will fail. I've discussed this with many of you on many occasions. And so we always agreed that it was important to point out these three elements: to have the political definition of the authorities, to have an a body or an executing unit of the government that has binding power, and also the other elements. We can always look at this from an open mind point of view to see what other options we have. So this is what we are discussing. We need political will. We also need a responsible entity, and of course, an instrument of public policy. And to do this, we require a regulatory framework that must provide a clear definition of family farming This is actually necessary, but it's not sufficient for the development of registries. We may have a very good operational definition, but that doesn't ensure that we will have a registry. However, it is necessary for us to have one. And then family farming registries view these institutional mechanisms entail organizational structures, funding, financial resources, and clear procedures for identifying the target population. This is something that we have envisioned beyond the conceptual definition of how we actually come up with a concrete definition and what instruments we will use and how we will build actually the registries of family farming or improve whatever we have already.
The last session we could not delve on this, but let me ask first if you have questions or comments.
Sí, hay una.
Pedro?
Preguntaron
Yes, there
si
is a
esta
question whether this
pregunta
Naobio,
si hace metodología nos
whether
permite
this
tener
methodology allows us to
datos,
have
puede también facilitar y conocer
data
y
to
evidenciar las
facilitate and
condiciones de los
learn
agricultores
the
familiares.
conditions of family farmers. Yes, yes. But now when we deal with the planning, then we will see what elements we want to collect from our registries. But it's a very good question, though. Okay, let's move. There's another question. Says that he didn't quite understood the three conditions on the existence of at least the public policy. Oh, at least one. Oh, okay. I mean, what's the purpose of the registries? Having a statistical system, and how do we guarantee that people will sign in or will enroll? The way is that for them to. But why? Let me put it in this way. Why registries? What are the benefits of having a registry? Let's ask ourselves that. If there is no benefit, people will not sign in, will not enroll. And doing this mandatorily, which is another alternative, we all know that probably this is not the best way. Because, I mean, we could do that. We could make it mandatory, but that's not part of the goals we're after. But this something maybe we could discuss. I don't know whether somebody would like to interject here. In Peru, they say they have a registry of agriculture and livestock producers. Is that a project? Is that a project in Peru?
Por ahora no tenemos más comentarios.
No, that's all we have. That's all we have. We don't have more questions or comments. Well, it was an interesting discussion. It is important. My point is that why people would like to be part of a registry? Why do we need such a registry as a public institution? I'm sorry, I'm speaking from the public institutionality. Why do we need a registry? Well, to focus, to target the tools and implementation, but why people would like to be part of a registry? Why individuals, family farmers would like to be part of a registry? Unless we give them a reason, people will not be willing to be part of it. And that's something, that's an open discussion. But let's ask ourselves those questions. Ask yourself those questions in your countries, in your sites. Okay, operations.
Una última pregunta.
One other question,
¿Cuál
though.
es
What
level de reglamento, de framework de marco de trabajo regulatorio
What's
que
the
se
regulatory
necesita
framework
formular en términos de
required
niveles, ¿no? Estamos
in
hablando
terms
de
of
nivel
levels?
nacional,
At the
nivel
national
ministerial o
level,
nivel
ministry
local.
level, or local level?
Cuando hablamos,
When we
bueno, a ver, nosotros el marco, el nivel de norma va a depender también de las
the
características de
regulatory
cada uno de los
framework
países.
is a function of a
Eso es
country.
importante.
That's important.
En nuestra región,
In our region,
en América del Sur,
in South
particularmente el Cono Sur,
America, in the southern cone,
se maneja a nivel
we
definiciones.
we
Bien
have
grandes a nivel legal, de ley,
big
y
legal
después existen
definitions,
normas
law,
más bajas, más
and
fáciles
then other
de
types of
ajustar,
rules and
según lo que tiene que
regulations
ver con los procedimientos, pero siempre a
as to
escala nacional.
procedures, but always at a
También
national
existen
scale.
normas nacionales,
Also, certain
y a nivel
national,
local,
I
de
mean
acceso a
local
algunas políticas públicas.
standards to access public
Pero yo
policies.
entiendo que
But
eso es un proceso,
as
se
far
tiene
as
que
I
dar en un
understand,
proceso de diálogo
that
y
is
de
a dialogue
respetando las características de cada uno de los
following
países.
the characteristics of
Quiero
each or
separar dos tipos de
peculiarities of
normas.
each country. We
Un
have two
marco
types of
normativo que
rules.
hace a la definición
One
qué es un
regulatory
agricultor
framework,
familiar
which
y
is
un
a
marco
definition
normativo que hace
to
otros
family
elementos.
farmers, and
El marco
another
normativo y los
regulatory framework
procedimientos
for procedures.
no tiene que tener
Procedures,
un
though,
marco muy fuerte, porque si tiene un marco muy
require a
fuerte,
very
los
strong
procedimientos
framework.
tratan de ser modificados.
Otherwise,
Entonces tiene que tener un procedimiento más
procedures,
operativo,
the people try
tipo
to change them.
acuerdos ministerial,
So
resoluciones
we
a
have at
nivel
the
ministerio
ministry
de
level
agricultura.
regulatory framework.
Esa es la recomendación,
That's the
porque eso nos
recommendation,
permite
though, because that
ajustar
will
de forma
allow
más
us to
rápida por la
adjust in a
unidad
much
operativa.
faster way with
Cuando
the
hablamos
operational side.
de
Now,
una caracterización a nivel
when
más
we
general,
refer
capaz que estamos
to a
hablando
general
sí algo a nivel
characterization,
nacional,
probably yes, this is at the
pero
national
es un
level.
tema interesante para
But
trabajarlo
that's an interesting
en las
discussion, though, for
sesiones regionales, si les parece. Lo podemos
regional
anotar eso, me
sessions.
parece
If,
que es
maybe we can park that
Perfecto.
idea for regional sessions, if I may.
algo más. Seguimos.
Anything
No,
else?
seguimos.
No, let's move
Bueno,
on.
quería hacer un repaso
Okay, let me
también de lo que
review
hablamos de funcionamiento del
our
registro.
discussion on the
Y
operation
ahí voy a hacer
of a
una,
registry. And
una
here,
serie de
let
etapas
me
del funcionamiento de los registros y de
break it.
institucionalización del
Let
mismo.
me I can
Profundizando un
offer
poquito
you a
más para que tengamos
breakdown
claro
so that
cómo diseñar estos registros.
we can have an idea as to how to
A partir de la
design
normativa
this
se define
registry.
quiénes son
From a
considerados agricultores familiares.
regulation, we
Hablamos
define
de
who.
identificación y
The
registro.
regulations will define who is considered a family farmer.
Los agricultores
First of all,
familiares se reinscriben
family
voluntariamente o
farmers
en forma
register
obligatoria para
voluntarily
acceder a
or
ciertos beneficios de esa disposición
mandatorily
que estaba
to access
abordando
certain benefits, as was just
en un registro
discussed
específico y para
in a specific
registrarse como
registry, and in
productores
order to register producers
desde
or
nuestra experiencia
farmers
completan un
have
formulario
to complete
de declaración jurada
a
o un
sworn
formulario
statement or a form
proporcionando información sobre
providing
donde están
information on
establecidos
the
los criterios para
established
ser
criteria for
considerado agricultor familiar
to be
en
considered as a
condición
family
familiar
farmer
independiente.
or production unit
En
or
algunos
family
casos
members.
podemos
In some cases,
documentar o poder acceder
we can
a la información
document
complementar,
or we can
pero
access the additional
básicamente es eso. El
information, but
formulario
by
vamos a ver
basically
después
it's a
cómo
form.
construimos. Hoy mismo vamos a trabajar sobre eso.
Today, later we will discuss. We'll show you such a
Y se
form,
pueden diferenciar
and then
diferentes tipos de
we can
de
have
tipos de
different
recopilación de información,
methods maybe used
desde
for
los
data
formularios
collection.
papel hasta las aplicaciones móviles,
Paper-based
donde la
or
gente
mobile applications,
hace entrevistas
uh, interviews,
y otros formatos.
and as
Todo
well
es
as other
posible,
formats.
pero lo
Everything is
importante
possible
es
here, but the point here is
poder conseguir captar
being
esta
able
información
to
y que la
capture
gente pueda
this information
declarar,
so
o
that
sea,
people
realizar la
can
información lo más veraz posible
provide
para poder tener la información deseada.
truthful
La
information.
recopilación y entrada de datos. Bueno,
Data collection and entry.
en general, todos estos
Overall,
registros
all these
entran en un sistema de
registries
información.
will go into an information system.
Puede ser, si es en papel, descargado a nivel
If it's
personal de la información o a
paper-based,
través de estos sistemas
all this
de
information may be uploaded,
plataformas en línea.
or if this is an
Eso
online
nos
platform,
obliga siempre
well, that
a mantener un
makes
sistema informático
that means we have to keep an IT platform, and then the processing, analysis, data processing and storage, that's a third stage, which through given processes, we can identify that it's a family farmer, and then data are stored. We can cross-check with other registries or databases to update and change the information if there are changes in the condition. I mean, it will allow us not only have a single unique registry, but people can also change part of the information. Then we have to manage such information for multiple purposes. One of these goals is the application of public policies. We can always not only classify but segment according to multiple criteria. And in Central America, they do that to apply differentiated public policies. We can also build statistics, analysis, and reports to understand what they are located, what type of production they have. And then, many times, the main goal is the identification of family farmers for the application of a specific public policies, targeting funding, market access, insurance facilities, among other, which will allow to monitor not only the impact of public policies, because since we're using these type of registers, we know how many are gaining access to certain policies, but also we can monitor the whole process. And of course, we can disseminate aggregated information for statistical purposes, which is part of our goal. Trying to know how many farmers we have in a given province, region, state, or how many are producing different products, or how many have certain characteristics, such as the question before. If, as a function of the information we collect, can we build that? Yes, and we will see when we discuss planning, we'll see what is that we want and we expect from our registries. Back to the questions asked, the institutionality of these registries. We have laws and decrees that for the creation of these registries, or they define the scope. But the recommendation is a legal framework. Should have a clear definition, but as well as the procedures based on regulations, something that may be change or amend much easier than amending a law, but through a ministry level agreement. And the other thing, which is important, most of you you belong to ministries of agriculture. Ministry of Agriculture is the main organization responsible for the creation and the implementation of these public policies, agriculture, public development, livestock, fisheries, I mean, everything. And overall, as part of the Ministry of Agriculture, there's always the situation of what area should be responsible for this. In our experience is that when registries are managed by the unit working on differentiated policies, that's even better. When they are otherwise, there is some sort of a divergence among needs and demand. Not that there are not other institutions collecting the data, such as departments of statistics or local governments, but the recommendation is the recommendation is to have these at the national level, but it's also good to discuss these at the regional activities to see what is the situation in each country. But yet another recommendation is institutional coordination, mechanisms for coordination, not only at the level of information exchange, but also public policies, information coordination to make sure there is an efficiency in the registry systems, a consistency. They need some sort of institutional consistency, but also we should use other registries to apply the public policies.
Public policies and actions to support family farming at the core of this process so that we can have targeted actually measures and make use of the registries. If we go back to the processes, it's essential to have clear, documented policies and actions that are consolidated and that are validated, that we can actually update the data in. This is extremely important, and also to have access to the use of information. We have to look at the personal data protection regulations to see what they say about this process. But we should be able to make this very open to users and also academia. And then we need also control and auditing type of mechanisms to ensure the quality and the truth of all the information that we have in those records. And for that, we have three pillars that we need. We have the resources to put that in place. If we tie this to a project that we're certain will be ongoing for a long time, that is very important. And also training our staff. That's extremely important, and it's something that we have insisted on with this type of workshops, because we need to have training for the management and for the whole registration process. We have tried to give or to provide an overall perspective, but actually technical cooperation is key to this, and also the South-South type of collaboration is extremely important to exchange information. And that's part of what we did before, and that we did with many other countries. Another essential element is actually the IT infrastructure. We actually need that for the storage and for the processing of data and for disseminating data. We need to have IT systems, and to be able to develop that, we will provide some recommendations and suggestions. Because IT has not to buy already packages that are in the global IT market, but however, to develop some in-house options. So far, I don't know if there are any questions. Yes, there are some questions. From Panama, we have a question and a comment about the agriculture and livestock system that have the governing body Almira Panama, that is composed of different institutions that manage programs and projects and that have laws to provide incentives to their customers and farmers. And so that will make the registry difficult. And he's asking how we can tackle that. Well, in Panama, I think that requires a political first level definition. That's what we were discussing before, about the political will and to have actually the powers
estar
that
buscando
are
3 veces
involved
en
to
3 registros
understand
para 3 proyectos
how
diferentes. Es
useful
mucho
it
mejor
is to
trabajar
have
en un
one
registro
single benefit
único
instead
en
of having
sentido para
one
vincular la
single
agricultura
registry instead
familiar
of having
y no
more
registro por
than
proyecto.
one.
Es central.
This is at the
Y
core
aparte generar
of
unidades
this
de
process,
administración
and to also
con
have
competencias, vínculos con
management
sindicados. Si
units
hacemos
that
todo eso para un
have the
proyecto, no
powers
tiene
to
sentido.
run the registry. If we do this just for a single one-off project, it doesn't make any
Bueno, esos
sense.
un comentario
And
más
there
que
are other
un
comments, I
comentario de
think, in
parte de
one
Estel,
question, a comment by
que
Corinne
en función de la
Estel
respuesta anterior que
that
diste
has to
tú,
do
¿no? Sobre
with
las
the
3
previous
condiciones,
answer you
en
provided about the
la
3
respuesta que usted
conditions,
hizo de diálogo con las comunidades, ¿no?
stressing how
En
important it is
función
to
del
have a
registro
dialogue with
y por
communities
ende la
and to
implementación,
actually
tiene que
disseminate
tener
the
un proceso de
register,
diálogo con las comunidades y un
and that the
acuerdo
implementation must
una
have this
responsabilidad de la administración
dialogue
pública.
opportunity,
Ese es
and not
comentario.
only
Totalmente de acuerdo.
to be subject to public administration
Estos son condiciones
responsibilities, but to have that
institucionales, capaz que me
dialogue.
faltó decir.
These are some
Perdón.
institutional conditions. Maybe I
Bien,
left that out.
totalmente de acuerdo, lo vamos a trabajar ese
But I
tema el
fully
viernes, o sea,
agree, and we will work
Y
more deeply on
una
that
pregunta
social
relacionada al tema
dialogue. And
del
there's a
desafío, ¿no?
question
En el proceso del
that has to
registro.
do with the process, the registering
¿Cómo y
process.
quién debería estar involucrado en el proceso de
How
recompilación de data en terreno
and who should be involved
y
in
a un
gathering
costo reducido?
information in the
Y también
field,
cómo
and how
asegurar
to do
que
that at
la
a low
data
cost, and how to
esté
ensure
actualizada,
that the
o sea, que
data
el
is
dato recopilado
updated,
esté siempre
that the
actualizado,
data
¿no?
collected is
De una manera
always updated
apropiada.
and appropriately.
Bien, eso parte de lo que vamos a ver
That's
ahora
part
que vemos
of
enseguida,
what we
pero
will
yo
look
me
at
animo
now,
ya a decirlo.
but I can
Depende de cómo diseñemos
say
esa
that
etapa.
it depends on how we design that
Pero
stage.
todo, si me permite, esa pregunta me la dejas para la próxima,
But if you allow
para el
me,
próximo, ¿podemos reiterarla?
we can save that question
10, 15 minutos más adelante.
for 10 or 15
Pedro,
minutes
me parece importante.
Sí,
later.
hay
Can you
una
please
mano
hold on
alzada
to
de
it
Eduardo
and
Flores.
hold
Eduardo,
that thought so we
te
can
pasamos la
actually
palabra, ya
answer
puedes
it in 10 or
habilitar el
15 minutes? And
micrófono
we
para hacer
have
tu comentario
Eduardo
pleno.
Flores, who has raised his hand.
¿Qué tal? Muy buenos
Eduardo,
días,
go
¿me
ahead.
escuchan? Solo quiero corroborar eso.
Good
Sí, te
morning. Can you
escuchamos bien.
hear me? Yes, we can hear
¿Qué tal? Muy
you.
buenos días. Mucho gusto.
Good
Fíjense que
morning.
nosotros justamente hemos estado trabajando
We
todo lo
have
que ha
been
venido mencionando
working
Fernando ahorita, casi
with
que al
what
pie de la
Fernando has
letra.
been mentioning
Hoy por hoy nos encontramos en
down to the letter.
vaya, en
We
un
have been
momento de
doing it
implementación
exactly
para
as he
hacer un
has said.
registro de agricultura familiar. Y
We
básicamente todo lo que ha
are
mencionado
working
él es
also
lo
on the
que hemos ido
implementation of
avanzando
that
desde la
family
normativa que
farming
define la
registry.
agricultura familiar
And we have made
hasta el marco normativo para
headway
la implementación del
in
registro.
the regulations that
¿Qué
we
pasa
need
hoy
and
por hoy? Hoy
also
nos
the
encontramos
regulatory
en una
framework that we
situación
need
que no
for
sé si es
that.
el momento
But
oportuno
now
para preguntarlo, dialogarlo,
we
¿verdad?
are
Es
facing a
que
situation. I don't know if it's
no
the
nos
right time
queremos
to bring it up, but it
enfrascar
is a
en que el
moment where we
registro
don't
sea
want
para
to
registrar
get all
precisamente a
tied up
posibles
in
beneficiarios de programas o
actually
proyectos.
having the
Si bien el registro
register
en su
be used to
momento va a dar la base
register
para poder hacer algo como
beneficiaries
eso,
of
no
programs or
queremos que el
projects.
fin de
Although
hacer
the
un
registry
registro
will give
sea
us data
para
on
que
that, we don't
registre a
want the
beneficiarios
purpose of
desde ya.
that registry
Entonces, ¿a qué me refiero
to
con eso? El
be a
registro se
registry of
diseñó
the
para
beneficiaries,
registrar a los agricultores
because
familiares
the registry
para una
was
gestión de políticas
designed to
públicas
register family
posteriores a tener un
farmers
registro.
for
Pero
public
registrar,
policy management,
porque ya de por sí voy
but
a
after having
registrarlos
the registry.
respecto a algún programa o
But to
proyecto,
have a register of
no es
people that will
contraproducente.
already be
Yo me adelanto a
benefited by a
pensar en eso
project or
porque
program
hemos visto que
w-
luego la gente
will
quiere
be
registrarse solo porque va a tener algún
counterproductive,
beneficio o
because
no se va
then
a registrar porque no va a tener un
people
beneficio
might
en el
only
momento,
want to
sino que
register because they
va
will
a ser
get a
posterior o no lo
benefit,
llegará a tener dependiendo de cuáles sean sus
or
cualidades
maybe
dentro
they
del
will be able
registro.
to
Entonces,
access that
¿cómo evitar
that
eso? ¿Cómo
benefit. So how
evitar
can we avoid
o
that?
orientar a las
How
autoridades a
can
entender
we
que el registro
actually
eso primero
guide
sirve
our
como una base
authorities so
fundamental
that
para
they
saber
understand that
dónde
the
están los
registry
agricultores,
is
cuáles son los
the
agricultores,
basis
a
that
qué
we
se
need to
dedican,
know where those
cuáles
family
son sus
farmers are,
características, cómo
what
están
they do,
tipificados para
what their
poder hacer
characteristics are, and how
intervenciones
they are
adecuadas
classified
en cada
so
uno
that
de
they
sus,
can do
de
proper
sus
interventions.
condiciones que tengan a nivel de campo, ¿verdad?
Those are the conditions that we have at the field
¿Puedo
level.
preguntarte algo, Eduardo?
Con gusto,
Can I
con
ask
gusto.
you a question, Eduardo? Yes,
Tú
please go
eres
ahead.
de Honduras.
You're
o
from
No, no, soy
Honduras
de
or
Guatemala.
Guatemala? I'm from
Perdón,
Guatemala.
de Guatemala. Entiendo, la pregunta es, ¿cómo están diseñando el registro?
And
¿Obligatorio
so
o
how
voluntario?
are you
Por
proposing
el
the
momento es
registry? Is it
voluntario. Por el momento es
mandatory or
voluntario. Y el
voluntary?
problema
Right
es
now it's
querer
voluntary,
volverlo obligatorio para poder, vaya a ser ese, esa persona que
but the
identifiquen
idea is
para
to make it
poderle dar
mandatory,
algún beneficio. Por
to
ejemplo, te voy a
identify
comentar
people
uno para que
to
nos
give them a
entendamos.
benefit. I'll give you an
Guatemala
example
está
so
en
you
un proceso de
understand.
entrega de fertilizantes para el
Guatemala
apoyo del
is
desarrollo de la
undergoing a
niñez productiva de las
process of
personas.
delivering
Si yo
fertilizers
vuelvo
to
obligatorio el
support
registro, voy a registrar a
farmers
personas
and
que sí
people.
sean
If I
agricultoras,
make it
pero con
mandatory,
la idea
I
de
will
que sí le
register
voy a dar
people
ese
who are
fertilizante.
farmers,
Puede
but with the
servirme para
idea that I
aumentar
will
y
deliver
lograr
the
hacer que se
fertilizer to
registren,
them.
pero
It can
también me
help
puede ser
me maybe to
contraproducente,
get
pienso
them
yo,
to sign
para
up
el
in the
momento en el
register,
que
but it can be
algunos no reciban
counterproductive
porque sus condiciones no
if
van a ser.
some of
Claro,
them
las
don't
justificaciones están,
actually
pero a
get
nivel de
the
campo apliquémoslo
fertilizer
así.
because they
Entiendo.
don't meet the right
A ver,
conditions. You know
el
what will
tema es,
happen with that?
si es voluntario,
So if
¿con
it's
qué motiva a la gente
voluntary,
para registrarse si no
what
tiene
drives
ningún
people
beneficio?
to register if
Hoy
there's no
por hoy el
benefit?
pensar
That is
que
the question then.
dentro de
Well,
las diversas
now,
intervenciones que pueda dar el
as
ministerio,
part
una
of
de
the
ellas pueda ser
different
para ellos.
interventions,
El problema está
one
que
of
nosotros,
them could be
aquí se
for
ha
the
tratado
benefit of those
vaya,
people, but the
de
problem
especificar, de explicar bien,
is
creo
that
que
we
es la
have tried
palabra
to
correcta,
explain
que hay
and
algunos
actually
beneficios que no son
specify
para todos, que
that
dependerá
there are some
de
benefits that
cuáles
were
sean
not
sus
applied
condiciones,
to
podrá recibir
everyone,
ese
that those
beneficio.
benefits will
Lo malo
depend
que
on the
acá se
conditions
ha
of each
politizado a
person.
nivel de municipios
But
demasiado, es un tema que lo
the
debemos de
bad thing
tocar
about
porque
this
sí,
is
sí
that
está
it
dentro de
has
la ecuación.
been turned into a
Que le dicen a las
political
personas, sí,
uh,
regístrese porque va a tener un beneficio.
discussion,
Y
far too
cuando a veces
much,
el beneficio que pueda tener no sea ese, sino que
thinking
sea
that
tal vez una
or making
situación
people think that
asistencia
if they sign up,
técnica,
they will get a
pueda
benefit. But
ser,
sometimes
entre otros proyectos
whether
que
they
pueda
get
tener
that
el
benefit or
ministerio, y no
not depends
precisamente el que
on
quieren ellos por el cual sea registrado, ¿verdad?
requirements that we
Bien,
need.
eso es para, vamos a trabajarlo más en la recesión regional, capaz,
That's
para
something
dar
that
una
we will
explicación
work
global,
on
pero
when we look at the
es un
overall
debate súper
situation.
interesante.
But it
Yo,
is a very
vamos
interesting
a
debate.
ponerlo, ya anotamos para la sesión global, dar un debate sobre esto.
When
A mí
we
me
have the
parece que
global
podemos hacer
session, we will have a
una acción,
discussion on
pero
that,
para no
and
seguirla hoy, pero me queda muy
maybe we won't be
claro.
able to address that
Gracias.
now, but
Muchísimas gracias, Bernardo.
your concern is very
Muy
clear
amable.
to me. Thank you
¿O
so
tenemos más
much.
preguntas?
Hay una
Should
mano
we
más de
continue? Are
Elmer
there many
Serrano.
more
Elmer
questions?
ya
There's a hand
estás
up by
habilitado a hablar.
Serrano. Go ahead,
Panamá.
please.
Sí, buenos
De
días.
From Panama.
Solamente para
Yes.
manifestar que,
I would
igual
just
que
like
el
to
que
say
antecedió, el compañero que antecedió,
that
el
just
registro
as
que
the
se lleva
previous
acá en
comment,
Panamá, que es
the register
el
that we have in
sistema
Panama
de información, el SIGAT,
is called
es abierto
SIGAT.
para todos los
This is
productores,
an information system that is open to all
para los grandes,
farmers,
los medianos, los
for
comerciales,
large,
los
medium
agroindustriales,
size,
y ahí se ha ido incorporando
retailers,
poco a poco pues los que son los
agro-industrial
elementos o
farmers.
criterios
And little by
por
little,
sus variables
the
y sus
register has
magnitudes
been including
de la
elements and
agricultura familiar,
criteria
y
that have to
actualmente pues
do with
estamos
family
en la
farming.
dirección de informática del ministerio, que es quien
In the IT
administra
department of the ministry,
todo el sistema,
which
toda la
is the one
plataforma,
that manages the whole
está
website and
trabajando los
platform,
últimos ajustes para la cuarta versión,
has
para
been
tener
working on the
algo
last
mucho más
adjustments for
aproximado
the
de la
fourth
definición
release, for the fourth
o
version of this,
categorización de los agricultores
so that we
familiares
can have a
según tipo.
finer definition or
Lo que yo
classification of
manifestaba es
family
que nos
farmers
preocupa un
by
tanto
type.
muchas veces
What I was
es
trying to
esta
say
parte
is that
de
we are
políticas
concerned about
que se manejan
the part
a
that
nivel de
has to
los
do with the
regentes del sector
policies that
agropecuario, en este
are
caso el
managed
ministro,
at
y
the
que cada
ministry
una de estas
level,
instituciones que forman parte
agricultural
del
ministry
sector, que son
level,
5 o 6
and that each of
instituciones,
the institutions that form
tienen
part of
sus
this sector, there are
directores,
five
tienen
or
sus
six
administradores
institutions, have their own
generales,
directors, their own general
y el
managers.
tema está en eso, pues ellos
So that's
aparecen dentro de la
the
ley, dentro
issue,
del marco, que
because
son
they
parte
appear
del
within the
tema de
law
la ley de la
as part
agricultura
of the
familiar.
framework of the
Pero
act or
como
law
dice
that
Ganga,
governs family
como dice
farming. But
Fernando,
as Fernando
tenemos
has
que tener esa
said,
voluntad política
we
y
need the
cada vez
political will
que se hagan estos cambios de ministerio,
so that every
de
time
ministros, pues quedamos
ministries
un poco que hay
are
que comenzar
changed,
nuevamente
we don't have to
a
start from
socializar
scratch
la
once again,
información en el
um,
momento que se pueda, o los
communicating the
espacios que el
information
equipo de
whenever we
tomador de
can,
decisiones pues tenga esa
or
voluntad de
whenever
darnos los
the
espacios para conversar con
decision-making
ellos,
team has a chance to do so, so that we can actually get their buy-in regarding the registry. And that's no easy task to convince and persuade people, because each government administration changes the teams, the teams change, and we need to start all over again. So in family farming, that has become a problem when it comes to the policies and the policymakers, decision makers. That's what I wanted to say. Because institutions get their own programs, their own projects, and the benefits that they offer farmers. Therefore, MIDA, which is the unit that manages the system and the website, has its own procedures, mechanisms, and standards, rules. And one of the rules establishes that they register technical staff that will manage, or that has the authority to enter the system and register in the system. So that's something that we need to work on further, to allow other technical staff members and other institutions in the system. So this could be open to other entities so that they can register the farmers that are part of their programs. But in general terms, the farmer registry system in Panama is a single system that has gradually included the family farming aspect.
Okay, that's perfect for the session, for the regional session. Maybe we could do that, Pedro. Yes, three more comments in the chat pod. One from Indonesia says that they have a national agency for information collection. This is some sort of agricultural census, and as part of the Ministry of Agriculture, they have a special center for information and data, which includes data on family farming. We have a question on the relationship between the agricultural agencies with these registries, and if these registries, well, we discussed that in the previous session. And the update, what's the ideal period for updating the registry's information? A couple of things here. One, I believe it's interesting, this comment from Indonesia on registries and census. We discussed this in the previous session, but maybe we could discuss that in the forum. And the last comment was what's the comment as to what would be the updating regularity? Okay, well, we'll look at the definitions, and there is a hand. Not anymore, but we have to move on. Okay, well, Rod, your question so that we can go ahead with the second part. Okay, okay, how to design and plan these registries. Well, basically, once the decision is made of having, we need to have a construction process in a documented manner. This is important, documented. We have to write down. And we need a proper planning before the operation. I mean, up front, this planning of the process is necessary. We need to know our current situation, the starting point. We have to set the goals explicitly, to set the strategy, and to carry out our working plan. Time allocation, work organization, and the budget. These needs to be validated with the authorities, with the decision makers. And this dialogue
cuánto sale.
let us know how much,
Cuánto sale depende de lo que queremos.
and then depending on what we want, what our goals are, how long it will take. That's part of the structure, and how we're going to organize. This has to be written down. This document has to be then validated, and with that, we'll go into a general planning process. This is the planning, the general planning. We have the initial planning, the starting point, the setting of goals, concept definition, then we have implementation, then we will implement processing, then we will go to reporting of products, and then an ongoing evaluation. This is a planning, simplified plan scheme. Many of you might be familiar with, but without this planning, we cannot set the goals. So we're talking here about that. This is a registry of family farming, how it works, the regional experience, what's the concept definition, and then we will see how we build these registries. Stage first is diagnosis and definition of objectives or goals. It is essential to establish the purpose of this registry. Unless we understand what we want, we cannot design our registries. Case of Mercosur, clearly, we need to identify our family farmers, their units and organizations, to facilitate access to differentiated or targeted public policies. That's our goal. But the question you should ask yourself is, what is the goal of the registries, and not the registry per se. The registry is a tool. Is a tool for what? That is something that's a question that should be answered. In other places, the idea might not be facilitate implementation of public policies, but identify the territory, diverse and complex populations and communities. That's perfectly possible. But that means a different goal. And that means a different design. Another goal, part of the Central American statement, is to identify family farmers. It is also, we also need to discuss these as part of the definition of the goals. And these may be seen as an asset that will contribute to information systems. So what's the goal we have? Having an information system of all farmers in the country? And probably that could be the ultimate goal. But then how can we include family farming? That's another element. But the point here is to set the goal. What is the goal set? Which will condition planning and the subsequent stages in the process. So, yet another important element is the defining the scope of work. How are we using these information system, national or local level? What will be the legal individuals, the legal entities? How are going to link all that? The context of analysis. We need to bear in mind that we cannot this is not a one size fits all. We need to consider institutional capabilities, coverage, territorial coverage, human resources, infrastructure available. We need, okay, if we want a digital record registry, but we have internet coverage issues. And how can we have a digital registry if they don't have internet access, for instance? Let's think of devices then.
Y eso nos va a condicionar.
And that will be
Si
conditioned.
hay que
And then
ver también
the
en
legal
esta
framework.
etapa de
At
diagnóstico,
this
¿cuál es el marco legal
stage,
que tenemos?
we need
Por el
to be
conjunto de
aware
leyes,
of what's
reglamentos y políticas
the set
normativas,
of
no solamente vinculado a la agricultura familiar, sino
laws,
registros administrativos,
regulations,
a
and
datos personales,
policies,
a organismos públicos, a
personal
competencias
data,
institucionales que tenemos que tener en cuenta a la hora
public
de diseñar.
agencies, and
Porque
the like
nosotros no
that need
podemos
to be
colgarnos
taken into account
competencias
in
de
the
otra
design.
institución. Si ya tiene
If
existe un instituto
if
que
there
tiene
isn't an
competencia en tal sentido,
organization
no
which
podemos
is
crear una nueva institución en
we
ese
can
sentido
the point is
que
not
pise las
to
competencias de otros.
create overlapping
Ese análisis de la
organizations.
normativa
This
interna también tiene
analysis
que
of the
ver con el tema
internal
de intercambio de
regulations
información y
has to
de
do
cómo
with the
vamos a levantar
exchange of
esa información.
information and how we collect such
¿Se
information.
entiende? Esta es una primera etapa que tenemos que
This
tener
is the
clara. El
first
objetivo
stage we need to
central
understand, and the
es este
main goal
diagnóstico y ese objetivo me condiciona las metas.
will condition the goals.
Teniendo en cuenta un objetivo y un
Bearing in
diagnóstico,
mind the
vamos a entrar en lo
goal
que
and the
llamamos diseño
diagnosis, we
conceptual.
will go into the concept
Este diseño conceptual
design. This concept
habla
design
de los instrumentos de captación de datos
analyzes the tools to collect
que van a
data
ser en funcional de las condiciones socioculturales, tecnológicas,
with
las
based on
necesidades de
social,
los ciudadanos.
cultural, technical, and
Y
technological
los criterios de
conditions, as well
validación
as
para,
the needs, a
para
validation
solucionar
criteria
problemas
to address
de
potential
falta de
issues,
respuesta, de omisión de información, de inconsistencia de datos,
omissions, multiple responses,
indispensable
and data
previamente.
inconsistencies. This is
Y los
something we have
productos
to
que quiero
discuss,
reportar.
and products or outputs
¿Sí?
to
¿Qué
be
es lo que quiero
reported.
hacer?
That is,
Vuelvo a ver,
what is
los
it we
objetivos que
want
quiero
to
reportar
do?
van a estar directamente vinculados al objetivo
The,
que
the
voy a encontrar.
output will be related to the goals set.
Y ahí recomendamos dos cosas.
And then we recommend a couple of things.
Y es parte de lo que hablábamos,
Part of what we
hoy decía, en la consulta.
said
No
before.
hacerlo verticalmente de arriba
Consultation,
abajo.
this is not a top-down approach.
Consultar con la sociedad civil.
We need to consult with the civil
Consultar con la academia.
society, consult with the
Y
academia,
contemplar
and
sensibilidad de
to
género,
consider
etarios, así como
gender,
aspectos étnicos y
age
raciales.
sensitivity, as well as ethnical and
Porque
racial
es
considerations.
fundamental porque si no vamos a ir a
Because
tener problemas en este proceso de diseño
this
conceptual.
is critical, otherwise we
Y
can
lo otro
have problems in this
elemento
concept
que
design. And the other
sugerencia,
element, the other suggestion
porque esto,
is
ya que
because,
estamos, decimos en Uruguay, ya que estamos,
like we said here in Uruguay,
acotar las necesidades de información, porque ya que estamos
let's
levantando
take
información,
the
vamos a
opportunity
hacer una cosa
to define the information
imposible
needs.
que pueda ser completada. Un registro administrativo, recuerden que es menos
Administrative
preciso que un censo.
registry is
Por tanto,
less
tenemos que
accurate than a
reportar
census,
la
so we
cantidad
have
de
to report
variables y
the number of
información a levantar.
variables of
Es
information to be
importante
collected.
tener en cuenta
It
esto.
is important to
Y
bear that in
también
mind.
vamos a tener
And it's
hay
we'll
que tener en
also
cuenta en
need
todo
to
esto
consider
cómo queremos hacerlo.
how we
Si
want
vamos
to
a hacer a
do
través de
it.
una declaración jurada, si lo
Through
vamos a ir a levantar los
sworn
datos, si vamos a ir a la
statement,
casa,
data collection,
todo va a estar vinculado en este
we'll
proceso.
call upon the people.
Y entonces,
And then
delimitar este marco conceptual,
we need
seleccionamos y
to
definimos categorías que sean
select
objeto de
and define
cuantificación y
different
evaluación para la
categories.
definición establecida para la legislación.
The
¿Qué es lo que
conceptual
estoy diciendo
framework must
esto?
be
Que
defined,
no
selecting and
podemos
establishing the
omitir en este
categories to be
proceso cuáles
quantified,
son las
along with the
definiciones
basic
operativas
criteria
de niveles
based
de
on the
agricultura
established
familiar, las
definitions of
definiciones conceptuales,
family
y
farming,
podemos preguntar
based on
algunas cosas.
definitions. Then we can ask some of them.
Y ahí empieza la
And then we
discusión sobre las
start the
variables,
discussion on
¿no?
variables.
Esta, que no es menor,
This
recordamos, los registros administrativos
administrative
datos más
registries
acotados que simplemente
reveal
los censos.
more
Entonces
limited
tenemos que
data
ser
than other
muy
instruments.
asertivos
So we
con
have to
esto.
be
Tenemos que ser muy críticos con la evolución de
very
la información.
critical.
Debemos hacer un balance y una evaluación
We need
fáctica de la
a
información
factual
requerida,
assessment and
así como la
evaluation of the
pertinencia.
information required, as well
¿Esto
as
qué quiere
its
decir?
relevance
Que no
must be
podemos
made. That is, we cannot
pedir opinión. Tenemos que
ask
tratar
the
de
opinion.
generar
So we have to build
elementos más quality.
a
Y si son quali, tienen que ser muy procesables.
quantitative and qualitative elements that may be processed.
No podemos evitar.
We
De
cannot.
acuerdo que uno de los objetivos es la calificación de agricultores familiares. Entonces no
One
tenemos
of the
que
goals is the qualification. So
ser imprescindibles en la toma de los criterios,
we
variables,
need to
magnitudes que hacen a
adopt
la
the
agricultura
criteria,
familiar
variables or
que están
magnitudes that make
establecidas en
up
el
family
párrafo.
farming, as I said before.
Y
And
se recomienda, como decíamos,
Then, as we said,
el equilibrio entre la cantidad de
it is
información
recommended that a
y la
balance be
demanda existente
maintained in the
y
amount
las
of information
diversidades de interés.
collected during the
Como
design
dijimos, ya que estamos,
stage.
¿por qué no preguntamos
Now,
cómo
why
tiene
not we
la
ask
maquinaria?
machinery,
¿Qué
about
estado está la
machinery,
maquinaria?
the condition of the
Y
machinery,
capaz que el
of
estado que está la
equipment.
maquinaria no es
Maybe the
importante para
condition of the
nosotros,
equipment is not
para el
important
objetivo que
for
nosotros
us,
buscamos.
for our goal.
A nosotros en
But
Uruguay nos pasa,
for
nos
us
pasa
in
a todos.
Uruguay, I
¿Por qué
mean,
no preguntás cómo están determinados
why don't
elementos?
we ask
Y
about
no,
certain elements?
porque no es el
And
centro del
no, because
objetivo
that's
de
not
la
the
construcción de este registro.
goal of the building of this
Bueno,
registry.
es importante
It
tener en
is
cuenta
important to
las
bear in mind
variables necesarias para los
the
registros, lo que
necessary
significan esto que hablamos, los
variables
datos de
for these
personas, datos de la familia,
registries, people,
datos de los
families,
integrantes del grupo familiar, más allá del grupo
members in the
familiar,
family
datos de las unidades
group,
productivas de los hogares,
the data
datos
on
de
productive units,
esto
households,
estamos hablando ya sea de la ubicación espacial,
just a
que a
special
veces
location.
no es un criterio, pero
Sometimes
tenemos que
it's
tomarlo en
not
cuenta.
part of the
En
criteria, but
tierra, la
this needs
tierra, el
to be
tamaño, el
taken into
vínculo,
account.
la
The land, the
selectividad,
size, the
el
productivity,
trabajo, cómo levantamos
work, and how
los bienes y los activos, la actividad productiva
assets,
realizada.
productive
Información básica.
activity. I mean, this is basic information.
Eso lo vamos a levantar con un
And that
formulario, con una unidad de captación de
through a
información vinculado a
form
la unidad familiar, al hogar.
related to the
Recordemos que el hogar
household,
en la agricultura familiar no tiene sentido que
household
se
and family
funcione.
farming and a
Y en
productive unit
vinculados a organizaciones ya
they
estamos hablando
merge.
de otro tipo.
And
Es otro tipo
organizations and data, that's a
ya
different
teoría, ya
thing.
hablamos de composición
That's
societaria, teoría
as
desarrollada, desarrollo,
data
metodologías
on
legales.
legal associative typology,
Un
ownership
elemento
structure.
fundamental de
One
este
of the key
diseño
elements in
conceptual,
this concept
y
design,
van a cerrar por acá porque
and
muchos se van a entretener con esto,
uh,
es
many of you
los
will enjoy
formularios de
this as
captación de información.
forms to collect
Y
information.
acá estoy levantando algunas de las informaciones que
Here I have
nosotros en los
some
países
of
de América del
the
Sur, en el cono
information
sur
items that we in South
de la
America
región de la REAF venimos
and
levantando.
the
Pero
region of
creo,
the
y por los
RAF
intercambios que he tenido con
have
muchos
been
de ustedes en
gathering.
Centroamérica
I
también,
understand that
sé que también algunos países
in some
de América del Sur
countries,
también lo vienen haciendo,
and
que es
especially in
datos
Latin
de
American,
integrantes del núcleo familiar,
South American
caracterizando las
countries,
personas
you have been doing this.
por
This
su
is like
documento de
gathering
identidad.
information on
Si
the family
sabemos que
unit
a veces en algunos lugares es un poco
members
complejo,
using their
los
ID
nombres, el
documents,
sexo,
which is something
la
that's
fecha de
complex in
nacimiento,
some
la
areas,
relación de
full name,
parentesco.
sex, date
Puede
of
haber
birth,
también variables de identificación
family
de género,
relationship, other
la
variables such as
escolaridad o
gender,
rol que tienen dentro
educational level, the
de
role
la
that
unidad
they
familiar,
play
los
within
datos
the
de la
family
familia
unit,
y
and
el
the
hogar,
family and household
los medios de
information,
contacto con la familia,
and the
las variables, las
contact
características del
details,
hogar,
the
de la
variables
vivienda
of
y
the
datos de la actividad
home, of the
productiva. Y ahí
house.
hablamos de datos físicos, de la
And
ubicación
then we
espacial de la
need
unidad
the
productiva, el
data on production
tamaño,
units, like
el
physical
vínculo
data,
de la
spatial
tierra,
location of
ya
the
sea que son
location
propietarios,
unit,
arrendatarios,
size,
ocupantes o si tienen
and
una
what
parte ocupada,
the
cómo es la
relationship or
relación.
connection to the
La
land
productividad en algunas
is,
oportunidades se puede
and
tener en cuenta
productivity
de
also
esa tierra, de
sometimes
ese
can
suelo.
actually be
Y después
included.
pasamos a datos de la actividad
And then
productiva, donde
also
recogemos la diversidad y la
data on the
complejidad de las unidades de la
production
agricultura familiar.
activities. We
Pero tenemos
gather
acá hay una
information on
tensión
the
de
diversity
intereses.
and complexity
¿Hasta
of
dónde
the
llegamos con la descripción de la actividad
activities.
productiva?
And
En un
then we have
registro
to
de la agricultura
see
familiar que no
how
es un
far, to
registro
what
de
extent
la
we
producción
gather this
de
information on family farming.
tomate, por decir
In
algo.
the case of tomato farming, for instance,
¿Hasta dónde llegamos? Eso es un
how
tema que tenemos que
far or to what
ponernos
extent
a
we
pensar.
get when it comes to gathering
Después,
information.
una variable muy
And
importante,
then
la
there's a
variable de
very
datos del
important
trabajo y la
variable
mano de
that has
obra,
to do
la
with labor
relación
and
con la mano de obra
workforce
familiar y la
data,
contratada,
the
¿no? Entre
relationship
otros
between
datos.
family and
Los
contracted
datos de los
labor,
activos, ya sean
and other
muebles o
data,
inmuebles.
data and assets, either
O sea, estamos hablando de
movable
animales,
and
maquinaria,
immovable
o inmuebles
assets like
relacionados a
animals,
infraestructura, y otros
machinery,
datos como datos identificadores
infrastructure,
particulares,
other
datos
data
referidos a la
such as
gestión,
personal
etcétera.
identifiers
Todo
and
esto,
anything related
o
to
sea, es un
management.
proceso que tenemos que construir en esta
This
región.
involves a process that we
¿En
need to
función de qué?
build.
En función del
And
objetivo que nosotros
based on
tenemos
what,
y
Bill?
en
Based
función
on the
de
purpose and
nuestra
objective
definición
that we
operativa
have,
de agricultura
and
familiar.
based on the operational
Está Fernando
definition
por
of
ahí y
family that we have.
le estoy robando
Fernando
el formulario de
is with
Argentina, que es un
us,
formulario
and I
bastante
am using
extenso,
a form that is
simplemente para que
quite
vean el
extensive
volumen de variables
from
que tiene, es a
Argentina.
modo de
So you can
ilustración
see
lo
how many
lo tienen
variables they
ustedes.
have. This is
Agradezco a
just to
Fernando
provide an example.
usar el formulario
I,
de
I,
Argentina.
I actually thank
Eh,
Fernando for being able to use
Brasil
the form
pasó
that they
del
use in
formulario que está a
Argentina.
mi
And then
derecha, que es la
Brazil
DAF,
moved from the
a la
form
CAF,
on the
que es un
right-hand
sistema
side to one
digital
that's
que
called
empiezan en la
CAF.
versión ya 3,
That
han desarrollado,
the
tienen un
digital
desarrollo
form is the
impresionante en
version,
Brasil,
third version
informático
already.
y
They
de
have
conceptual y de
great
trabajo en este
IT
sentido.
development.
Han pasado
They
por
have
muchas
done
etapas,
lots
el
of
registro
conceptual
tiene
work
ya de
as
más de
well.
30,
They have
30
undergone
años, o
different
sea,
phases and stages.
es
This is
impresionante.
already
Brasil tiene una
uh,
experiencia impresionante.
uh, this has
Bueno,
been
este es
developed
nuestro
over the last
registro
30
Uruguay y
years. So
mostramos
they
una
have a
parte del
very
registro de
impressive
Paraguay para que vean
register.
que la
This is
colecta de
one from
información, esto es
Uruguay
un
and the
formulario
other one
papel,
from
también tenemos
Paraguay. So you
formularios
can
también
see this is a
digitales
paper-based form.
en
There are also
nuestros países
digital
también, o sea,
forms in
tenemos
other
versiones diferentes de
countries.
acuerdo
So we have different versions,
a no dejar a nadie afuera.
which are meant
Y
to
bueno,
leave no one behind.
finalmente quiero
And
pasar a la
finally,
última etapa.
I want to move on to
Y
the
después vamos a
last
profundizar en las
stage.
sesiones regionales,
And then
todo esto
in the
porque tiene
regional
mucho
sessions, we
contenido.
will be able to do
Es
a
el
deep
diseño
dive
operativo.
on
Y ahí
each of these
hablamos del
items because there's
procedimiento
lots of
para la captación de datos.
content. So this is the
¿Cómo vamos
operational
a
design and the
documentar la
procedure
captación
to
de datos,
gather
la
data
recopilación de
and
los
how
datos,
we will document
la
that
estrategia
data,
que vamos a utilizar?
the
Vamos a
strategy
ir
that will
a
be
la casa,
used. We'll go to the
vamos
households,
a hacer que la gente venga.
maybe, or are we
Ese es
actually going to make people come to
procedimiento
us?
que hay que
That's
documentar.
something that we need to document.
Documentarlo y establecerlo
And we need to
una norma
establish
en menor rango, pero porque se puede
in a
cambiar.
standard of a
Aspectos
lower
técnico-administrativos de organización del control,
importance,
cómo vamos a hacer el
perhaps, but
control, la
something
fiscalización de la
that can
información,
actually be
etc.
done and then could
El
be
procesamiento de
changed
la
as
información
required. Technical
y el diseño de
aspects,
sistemas de
uh,
captura,
control
codificación,
organization,
validación,
and the
explotación
design of
de
the
resultados
collection
y la cantidad de
systems,
control. Esta etapa es
encoding,
fundamental
validation,
adecuar las capacidades que nosotros
data,
diagnosticamos en la etapa anterior, en la etapa
processing.
inicial,
That
y
is
lograr la
all
sostenibilidad de
very
estos
important
instrumentos. Porque podemos desarrollar terrible
because we
capacidad,
may
pero
develop
si no tenemos la capacidad de
a large amount of
sostenerlo en nuestros
capacity, but
países,
if we don't
no
have
sirve de nada.
that
Tiene que
capacity to
estar
actually
sostenido en forma
make that
permanente.
sustainable over
Los registros
time,
tienen que existir en forma
it
permanente,
won't
no pueden
be
ser registros
worthwhile.
puntuales.
It has to be something that we can keep for a long time.
Quiero poner arriba de la mesa para
And the
esto
other thing that I
cómo
would like
vamos
to
a
speak about
esto de los procedimientos de recolectar información.
is how we're
Hay
going
un
to go
conjunto
about
integrado y
collecting
ordenado
information.
de,
There's a set
de procedimientos orientados a
of
colectar la información y controlar las
procedures
actividades y la organización administrativa del
that have
proceso.
to do with data collection.
Por ejemplo, acá tenemos un ejemplo que ha sido de estrategia operativa que Brasil,
This is
por
an
ejemplo,
example
tiene
from
los
Brazil
agentes emisores, que son
with
agentes
the issuing
públicos o privados que
agents
tienen
that could
una
be private or
acreditación
public,
para
and
poder
that
desarrollar
require
la operación.
accreditation to be able
En
to
Argentina
actually
existió un
operate it.
momento,
In Argentina,
algo parecido,
it had something that
ahora
was quite
después Fernando también
similar.
nos puede comentar
Maybe
sobre el
Fernando
estado de
can
situación.
actually
En Uruguay
enlighten us
vienen,
on that
son
later.
solamente,
And
y
in
en Paraguay también lo
Uruguay
hacen solamente
and in Paraguay,
funcionarios públicos.
this is only done
Existen
by
muchos modelos, desde
actually
lo más clásico, como estamos
public,
hablando, hasta más institucionalizados.
actually
Esta estrategia tiene que estar
administrative
documentada y tiene que
workers.
crearse en la función de las características de cada país.
And so this has to be based on the characteristics of each
Sí,
country.
es importante, algunos tienen que contemplar la recolección de la información, cómo se hace la
And
inscripción y
then,
la
of course, it's
emisión,
important to
el
think about
almacenamiento de
how the
datos e
information
información
will be
segura, la
collected, how
validación de
it will
datos,
be
la
registered, how
explotación
to
de los datos y la
store it,
utilización de los
how
microdatos
to
para
validate
reportes
it,
y el
how to make
desarrollo
it
de aplicativos y
safe
sistemas de información. Es
and
todo
secure.
un tema.
And also, this is quite a
El soporte de información y
totally
el
different
dimensionamiento
topic
de la estructura,
about
bueno,
actually how we manage all this
tenemos
information and
que
then
también
how
que
we will
tener en este
support
diseño operativo
the
¿qué
information.
es,
The design has to include
qué es
this.
necesario para qué recursos
It has to
necesitamos?
include the
Y abarca
resources that we
no solo
need to
los
achieve
equipamientos,
this.
sino también los recursos materiales y la estructura
It has
operativa.
to do, of course, not only the equipment, but
Eh,
material resources and the
y la
operational
infraestructura es
structure,
necesaria.
the infrastructure.
Y la determinación eso va a depender de los procedimientos y el desarrollo de los
And
sistemas
that would
informáticos que
depend
desarrollemos.
on the development and
Y
procedures
esto
that
nos
we
determina el
develop at the
costo de la
IT
operación,
level,
tanto directo como
which
indirecto.
in turn
ahí
will determine the cost of operation,
dimensionar
both
la
the
estructura
overhead
en función
costs
del
and
diseño
the
conceptual,
direct
recursos
costs.
humanos, equipamiento,
This
infraestructura.
has to do with
Adecuarla,
the
y eso tenemos
structure
que
and
tener en
how
cuenta que
we
tiene que permanecer en el
size
tiempo,
the
¿no?
structure
Darle sostenibilidad.
based on the different
Adecuar
human
dimensionamiento en
resources,
función de nuestros
equipment,
objetivos y las
infrastructure.
capacidades
We need to
institucionales.
adapt it to
Presupuestar la
our
estructura y el costo de
institutional
funcionamiento,
capacities and our
planificar la
objectives
sostenibilidad del registro y
to
el
make a
cuidado
budget
con
for
registros
the
puntuales.
functioning and for the
Si bien los
infrastructure
sistemas
and
informáticos
plan the
pueden
registry.
adquirir, si es parte de lo que les
And
decía,
although the IT
a
systems can
nosotros
be
lo mejor es que
actually
se desarrollen en
purchased,
mejor
the
desempeño en los casos
best
que hacen desarrollo
option for us
in-house.
is to have
¿Qué quiere
an
decir?
in-house development of the
No es recomendable
IT
comprar paquetes,
resources.
sino
It's not
desarrollar sistemas
recommendable to buy
adecuados a
packages,
nuestra
but rather
acción.
it's better to develop our own in-house
Es un
systems.
problema el tema de los sistemas informáticos, porque a veces se
IT
confunde los sistemas
systems
informáticos con el propio registro.
actually pose a
El propio
problem
sistema informático se come el
because
registro y esto
sometimes
es un
they
problema
are
que tenemos que
confused
evidenciar.
with the
El
registry
registro
itself.
es
The
una
registry
acción para calificación de
is an
política, no es un
action
sistema
that can be
informático.
used to
Si confundimos el sistema
for the
informático con el registro, tenemos un
qualification
problema.
of policies. It's not the
Y a veces
IT or the
el
software
volumen
system
de costo que
itself.
tiene
We
estos
should
sistemas
not
informáticos
confuse
nos
them
hacen a que
because that would be a problem.
ocultar todo lo otro que es importante
And
en
sometimes what
nuestra
happens is
planificación.
that
Y después
we
empiezan a
get
tomar
the
medidas por
IT
sí mismos
systems which
los
begin
gestores del
to
sistema informático que afectan
hide
todo.
certain
Por eso es
processes and then
importante que
begin to
esté todo esto
actually
bajo el amparo de una unidad de gestión,
make
lo que hablamos
decisions on their
anteriormente.
own.
Y que los operadores del sistema informático
The IT
trabajen en
operators
función de las demandas
need to work
de esta unidad de gestión, esta
based on the
unidad de registros
demand
como tal.
from the management
Ponerla en
unit.
valor como
A
tal, que es
management
la que va a
unit
entender el
that
proceso en
needs
su
to be in
conjunto,
charge of the
que es la que va a
register,
vincular con
that
las
will
políticas
understand
públicas,
the
con las
process
acciones,
as a
con
whole,
la
and
definición
will link
operativa,
it
con los
to
mandos
public
medios
policies and
y
to
los mandos
different
jerárquicos.
actions and to
Y
the
hay una cuestión.
mid-tier
Están los registros únicos, estos
management
sistemas de información
or
que son
other
registros únicos en América
hierarchical
Latina, que
levels.
nos daría para una discusión
And
en
there's
la
a question
mesa
about
regional.
these. Will they
No
be
quiero
single
solamente apuntalar que esos
registries
registros únicos a veces han
in Latin America or
complejizado
not? The
y
thing is
no
that
han
sometimes single
contemplado de manera
registries
correcta las
have
variables de
made
agricultura
everything
familiar,
more
lo que
complex
hace
and
a un
have not really
problema de los
contemplated
registros en sí
family
mismos y a
farming
este funcionamiento que estamos
properly,
hablando.
and that has been an issue.
Yo llegué hasta acá, Pedro, capaz que me apuré en la última
So this
etapa,
is as
pero quería
far as
cerrar. Después,
I
en
have
la
for
próxima clase global, que va a ser
presenting.
dentro de un
Maybe I
mes,
hurried a little
vamos a
bit,
repasar de
but
vuelta
in the
todo esto, pero
next
la
uh,
idea de esto es empezar a
workshop that we
trabajar
have next month,
con
we
las
will
secciones
actually address this more deeply.
regionales,
But the
donde
idea is to
voy a
begin
estar
working
con
with the
ustedes
regional sections
y poder
where I will be
contemplar
accompanying
parte de
you
estos elementos.
to observe
No sé
how
si
all of this is carried
seguramente
out.
hay ya muchas preguntas, dedicarles
I,
un tiempo y venga.
of course, expect there to be
Gracias,
questions already,
Fernando. Acá por
so we
mientras hay un
can
comentario
proceed
de
to answer them.
Mozambique.
There's a
Informa que
comment
están
from
registrando los
Mozambique
agricultores mediante una plataforma electrónica que se
where
llama
they are
UPA
registering
y
farmers
que el mayor
by
desafío hoy
means
radica en
of
la funcionalidad de
an
la
electronic
plataforma, ya que
platform
en
that's
algunos lugares
Apupa,
no hay
and
señal de
the
internet y no
challenge is
funciona bien sin
that sometimes
conexión.
there's no internet signal, and
Parte
so
de lo que
the
planteamos
system
hoy.
doesn't work well without that.
Y está abierto para preguntas.
That's part of what
Si
we
alguien
mentioned
se
in the
quiere
workshop.
hacer la
And
pregunta
now
en
the
vivo,
Q&A
ya alce la
session
mano y
is
nosotros
open. If
habilitamos la
anyone wishes
palabra.
to
Está
ask
Eduardo
a
Flores.
question, you can raise your hand.
Eduardo.
Ya puede hablar.
¿Qué tal ahí tal vez para apoyar a
Eduardo
lo que el
Flores.
compañero mencionaba? Nosotros para hacer
Just
recopilación, a la
to
anterior pregunta,
address what you were mentioning,
para recopilar la
to
información
gather
diseñamos
information,
una app para poder captar
we
la
designed an
información del
app
formulario básicamente por
to be able
medio
to
del app.
gather the information
Esta app se
that we
diseñó
need in
para
the
que pudiera
form.
ser usada
It was
también
designed
sin uso de datos o
to be used
sin,
without
como nosotros
any
datos le llamamos conexión a internet, se podría decir,
internet
Sí.
para que
connection.
luego de poder tener datos y pudiéramos
It could
hacer
be
la
done
sincronización de la
offline,
información
so
a
that
la base de
then
datos
when
nacional,
there
¿verdad?
is a
Porque
connection,
si
we
para
can actually
nosotros la
sync it
infraestructura de
with the information that
telecomunicaciones
we
es
have.
bastante mala, pues
Because
entonces
in our
había
case,
muchísimos lugares
the
donde no
telecom
podíamos captar el
infrastructure
dato
is very
en el
poor.
momento por la
So
conexión,
many
pero
times we
los
weren't able to
técnicos
gather the
diseñaron
information
la app para
because of
poder
that problem, but
utilizarla no
the
teniendo esa
technicians
conexión,
designed
¿verdad?
the app so that it could be used offline as
Bien.
well.
Hay
Es
que
una
pensar en ese
solución.
tema.
¿Sí? Es una solución. Bien.
That's a solution.
Naobil, Shep,
Now, please, Ship,
puedes habilitar el micrófono también.
you can unmute your mic.
Hola.
Bien, sí.
Hello.
Bueno, primero pues agradecerles, ¿verdad? Por la sesión. A mí me
First, I would like to
parece
thank
que
you
más que elementos
for
técnicos,
this
también nos deja
meeting,
bastantes
for this workshop.
reflexiones, digamos, en torno
I think from a technical
a la
perspective,
funcionalidad y el
there's
objetivo
a lot to
de la
reflect
creación de
on
la base de datos, digamos.
regarding the
Yo soy de
functionality and the
Guatemala, del Comité
purpose
Campesino del
of the
Altiplano.
database. I am
Y
from
justamente, digamos,
Guatemala,
a mí me
from the
parece que hay que
high
buscar, digamos, el
mountain
porqué
range
de la
farming
recolección de datos. Y a mí
community.
me parece que más que tener información, debe de
I
ser
think that rather
para
than
tener prioridad, digamos, de acuerdo a las necesidades de los
gathering
productores o de
information
los agricultores
just for the sake of
familiares.
gathering information, we
A
need
mí me
to
parece
be
que
able to have
justamente, digamos, no se puede
information
seguir
gathering for
teniendo
assigning
la
priority to
coordinación para la
farmers.
recopilación de datos a través de las
I
municipalidades, por
think that
ejemplo,
the coordination
porque
of
muchas veces, digamos,
data
las
gathering should
municipalidades lo
not
que
be
van a
done
hacer
by the
es
municipal
meter a sus
districts anymore,
afiliados, a sus allegados,
because
porque es un
what
tema
they will
político
do
electoral
is
meramente, digamos.
enter
A mí me
whoever
parece
they
que si no
want
hay
to
una
enter
coordinación
there,
realmente, digamos,
and it could
verdadera con las
become
organizaciones
a
de
political
base, con las
issue. So I think
organizaciones
that if it's
campesinas,
not well
productoras,
coordinated with
la información
grassroots
que vamos a tener
organizations
definitivamente no
and
va a ser
with
como
farming
la que refleje la
organizations, the
realidad de la
information that
situación
we
del
will have
campo.
will not
Entonces,
reflect the reality of
bueno,
the
yo me quedo con esas
situation
reflexiones que es
in
importante que
the
el
field.
Estado, el ministerio, digamos,
So it's important
tenga
for the
una
ministry
brecha,
and for the
coordinación muy,
state
muy fuerte,
to
digamos,
have
con las
very close
organizaciones de base, pues son
coordination
ellos
with the
y ellas
grassroots
quienes trabajan con
organizations,
las comunidades
because those are the ones that work
indígenas y
with the
campesinas. Y aquí me
indigenous
generaban
and
bastantes
farming
dudas, por
communities.
ejemplo,
So
¿vamos a
I have
registrar o no vamos a
many
registrar la
doubts
gente
about
que
this,
tiene
whether we will
casi nada
register
de
or
tierra,
not,
por ejemplo?
people who have almost
Pero sí, digamos,
uh,
producen a
no
través de
land or very little
macetas,
land,
a través
but
de
do
llantas, digamos, o
have
sea, hay varias
production by
situaciones
means
ahí
of
que
planters
revolotean en la
or
cabeza y que me parece
pots, or
que pues
maybe
son
using
importantes seguirlas
old
abordando y pues
tires
nuevamente
to
muchísimas
plant.
gracias ahí por dejarnos la espina y la
So
chispa de las discusiones y eso
again,
que me parece
I would like
que
to thank you
pues
for
en
having
Guatemala hay mucho que seguir haciendo, hay mucho que seguir
enlightened
haciendo
us on
para
this and made
verdaderamente
us
que
reflect.
esta base
There's
de
a lot
datos
to do in
refleje
Guatemala
las
to
realidades del
have the
campo que tan
database
necesarias
reflect the
son. Nosotros
reality that
hemos
we
visto, por
have
ejemplo,
in
que
our farming community.
em, uno de los
This is
municipios
absolutely necessary. We
bastante
have seen that
afectados,
one of
por
the
ejemplo, aquí en la
municipalities
región
that
del
has
sur,
been
no
affected
está
in the
siendo
southern
contemplada para
area
programas de
has not
gobierno
been
porque en
included
teoría,
in
digamos, no
government
cuenta con
programs
temas de
because
pobreza,
theoretically
pero
it
lo están
doesn't
buscando
have
en base a la
poverty
productividad de
characteristics,
empresas, digamos, y
but
no tanto a
we
la realidad de las
are
familias. Entonces,
actually
hay ahí
looking at
situaciones
the
e indicadores
productivity
que
of companies
deberían
rather
de ser
than
más
the
apegadas a
realities
la
of
realidad y
families.
pues
So there should be
eso. Muchas
indicators
gracias.
that should be more tied
Muchas
to
gracias.
or closer to reality. Thank you.
Tenemos, ya paso la
Thank you.
palabra a Edgar, but before that, change to English just to do a quick remind. No, we have interpretation for the questions as well. So if anyone wants to jump in and ask a question in English or in French, you can do it. Don't be shy. We have plenty of participants that speak Spanish, but we are also ready to support in French or English. Don Edgar,
So,
estás habilitado a hablar.
Edgar, you're on.
Sí, primero para responderle a
First of all,
Fernando que la
Fernando,
anterior actividad mencionamos que
the
varios
previous activity,
compañeros de
we
la
said that
dirección estaban
many people
acompañando
from
la capacitación, ya que
many people
inicialmente
from the office
se mandó
were
el nombre
in the training because the
al
name was
registro de dos personas, pues el licenciado
circulated two
Rubén Quirós
people,
de
Ruben
planificación y mi
Quiroz from
persona.
planning and
Y
myself.
ahora pues están
And
participando
now we
6,
have
7 hasta 8
6
técnicos de
or
acá del
7 or
departamento de
8
proyectos, y ahí le acabo de
technicians
mandar los
from projects,
correos
and
pues para que se le pueda remitir información y
I've sent you
y
the
otros datos.
emails
En
so that you
relación a
can
los registros,
circulate
pues
all the information
nosotros
for the
tuvimos una
registry. We
experiencia de trabajo con la
had
FAO,
this experience with the
una
FAO,
consultoría donde elaboramos
a consulting
un formato
project where we
con
produced a
información
form
que queríamos
with the
recabar de los
information we wanted
productores.
to collect
En
from
gran medida
farmers,
contiene lo que estuvo
containing
presentando en una de las diapositivas
what
de acá de Fernando,
Fernando
recolectando los
presented in
datos
one
del
of the
productor, todos los
slides,
datos de su familia
producers,
completo, los datos de la
data,
finca,
family,
de los cultivos y de
the
todo.
farm, crops and everything. This form went through a validation process. Around 150 farmers, which we interviewed with the FAO and Rural Development Unit. This validation allowed us to carry out certain adjustments to the series of questions depending on the level of difficulty. For some producers or farmers to understand the question or to answer such a question. Then we received FAO support. A specialist was hired, and this field validated form was taken to a digital app. And they built an app. The app was developed and was implemented in an area in Panama, Nove Publi County, through a training process with the 65 technicians throughout the country. And we use this app we developed with FAO. So they had the possibility of, in remote places, they could connect, use a satellite connection and do that online so that if they couldn't, I mean, they could collect information, and then once the technician was back in the office, could download that information with internet access. This information was housed in a server, government authority, which regulate the use of data collection. But along the way, we found that this unit was working on unique farmers registry, so we had strong discussions with teams. We had people from around 19 public agencies, and we discussed, it was a heated discussion, so to speak, for them to understand what we were looking for in family farmers registries. We always said that we wanted a differentiated registry for family farming, not just a unique registry. This unique registry was very heavy in terms of farm, general information on the farm, and then plots within the farm. And if a farmer had, say, 7 productive units, we had to break down into sections for the yucca, ñame, or cattle, or livestock, and you have to go start all over. And it was very information intensive. We were unable to have a unique system or standalone system for family farming, and now we're part of SIGA. We've had the opportunity to work with the IT team, with the MIDA. They house this SIGA platform, and with them, we've been able to include the family farming criteria as well as variables, criteria, magnitudes or sizes to measure. And I believe we are off to a good start. Last week, actually, we had yet another meeting to exchange information with the IT people. We offer them more information in terms of the things that SIGA should have, so as to identify who are the family farmers, how many family farmers in the country, where they are located,
a qué se dedican esos
what
agricultores,
do they do,
¿verdad? Y qué otras
and
actividades
what other
vinculadas a la agricultura familiar
activities on
están
family
desarrollando. O sea
farming
que
are
ha
being
sido un
conducted. I
proceso
mean, this has been
largo y
a long process,
bastante dificultoso en el camino, pero creo
quite
que por ahí
difficult, so to
vamos
speak,
poco
quite
a poco
challenging.
logrando lo que
But
queremos en el tema de registro de agricultores
in
familiares.
the family
Eso es lo que
farming
quería manifestarles.
registries,
Gracias.
we have
Muchas
achieved a
gracias,
certain
don
degree of
Edgar.
success. Thank you.
Hay un comentario más, una
Thank
persona
you,
más de
Edgar. There's
Robin
another comment from
Armendares.
Robin
pregunta
Armendariz. There's a question.
Sí, con esta gente.
Robin, tienes,
Robin,
puede
could
habilitar tu
you
micrófono y hablar.
please turn your microphone on.
Además, una pregunta en
And there's a question in the Q&A.
No escuchamos, Robin.
No se escucha.
No, Robin,
Voy con la pregunta, ¿le
you're
parece? Y ya que se
okay.
pregunta Robin.
Let's go back to the
Ahí se
question.
pregunta Robin.
Okay, there is Robin, or
¿Robin?
maybe not. Robin, are you on?
¿Robin? No, está complicado.
No, no.
¿Te parece la pregunta?
Sí,
Okay, shall
adelante.
we read the question?
La pregunta, sí, la leí recién.
I was just reading the question.
En la pausa y claramente planteo
Clearly,
el tema de enfoque de género, lo
the
pusimos
gender
arriba de la mesa en la
approach,
configuración de los
it's
formularios.
part of the
Es
planning and the
fundamental
forms.
poner el
It's
tema
critical
del
to
enfoque
have
y considerar las mujeres. Por
this
eso el
gender
tema,
approach.
bueno,
That's
eso es un
why.
ideal, es
But
fundamental construir
we need
esos
to
formularios
build
en un proceso
those
de diálogo.
forms through a dialogue
Confluir
process
esas variables con un proceso de diálogo.
and include those
No
variables,
solamente el tema
not
de
only
incluir el sexo, sino también las variables de género y
gender,
vincular
but
también
gender
la
variables
vinculación de las personas
and
con la unidad productiva.
how they
Si tienen
relate to the
cuáles son
productive
los
unit.
roles que
I mean, what
funcionan
are
y
the
eso
roles they
hace
play?
a
And
identificar
that will
dentro del proceso de
lead
cultura familiar, por
to
ejemplo, las
identify
mujeres jefas de familia que tienen a cargo muy fuerte
women which are
ejemplo, para
responsible
poder
for
planificar qué
the
puede ser
children
una
and
inserción
they lead
precisamente
families
para
so
dejar
that we can
consolidados. Y Robin,
have
no
a
sé si
more
capaz puede mandar
accurate
la pregunta
planning.
por el Q&A.
Maybe Robin, you can write your question down in the chat pod or in the Q&A pod.
Sí, yo creo que no está logrando conectar el micrófono.
I believe he's not.
No veo más preguntas,
I
hermanos.
don't see
Sí,
any
bueno, yo
more
quería dejar la
questions. And
tarea,
let me,
¿te parece?
yeah, shall we
Sí.
discuss the
La idea es que me
exercise?
entreguen un documento escrito. Acá
For this,
nosotros
we'll need a written
nos han
document. We
elaborar
need
una planificación para realizar
we need a
un
plan
registro de la agricultura
to
familiar que sea
carry
mujer
out
en nuestro país.
a family
Establecer,
farming
en este
registry in
caso,
your
lo que
countries. In
planteamos,
this case,
en la
set
parte de la planificación, un objetivo general,
set a general
fundamental y
goal,
detallar la propuesta
and
del
then
diseño
a detailed
conceptual y operativo.
proposal
O
of
sea,
the
todo.
concept and
Vamos a ver, ¿no?
operational
Y
design. I
esto
mean,
se hará en base a una
everything, right? The
definición
whole
operativa
process.
de
This
agricultura
based
familiar
on an
que está establecida en
operational
nuestro país,
definition of
las
family farming. And in
variables
your
que deben
country, you
contemplar los
establish
formularios
the
deben estar
variables that
formulados,
should
las
be included
variables,
in the data collection
y
form
cuáles
for
serían los
registration,
formatos de recolección
and
de
what
datos.
would be the
Esto es una
appropriate
cosa
data
para
collection
trabajarlo,
formats. This is something you should
pero
work
esa es
on,
una sola
but
tarea
this is
y
one
en un documentico corto
exercise. This
que
should be a
podamos
short
empezar
document. I
a
should start
esbozar un...
drafting.
si ya lo tienen, y
If
me
you already
parece bien que
have
lo
it,
pusimos en la pauta, después lo vamos a ajustar,
maybe we could adjust that
le
for
vamos a pedir
later cases. But
que
if you already have it,
identifiquen igual el
please
objetivo,
identify
que
the
identifiquen
goal,
en qué etapa está la
identify
planificación de
what
ese
stage
registro,
of the
y
planning
si
you
tienen que
are,
hacer
and
un ajuste
if you need
a
to
este
make
diseño
changes
conceptual y
or
operativo,
adjustments to
lo planteen.
these
Y si ya tienen las variables
concept and
trabajadas, seguramente
operational design.
consideraremos
And if you
eso.
already have the variables in
Yo
place,
paqueteé
please
hoy y
include that.
pasado de hora
Okay,
aparte.
this is the end of my presentation, and I
Perfecto,
believe we.
Fernando. Entonces, colegas,
So, dear
ahí está la
colleagues,
tarea. Esta tarea va a
that's
estar
the
conservada en la
exercise.
plataforma del curso.
This will be hosted in
Pido a
the
todos aquellos
platform.
que acceden a ese espacio,
So please
pueden repetir
access
con
to the
con estos que
platform
son fondatores como
and
yo dije. Y también en la próxima semana nos van a enviar un correo,
we will
un
be
recordatorio de ese
circulating
tema específico, pero también
an
ya
email with a
poniéndolos
reminder
en
of this, but
contacto
also
con quienes van a ser los facilitadores que van a
to
preparar esa
let you
sesión
know
regional,
who will be the
que Fernando mencionó y
facilitators
que
in the
también habíamos
regional
compartido que
sessions, like
íbamos a
Fernando
organizar, ¿no?
referred to.
Entonces, en 2 semanas más,
So in a
y va a
couple
ser
more
un horario
weeks,
mucho mejor para
in a
todas y
much
todos. No vamos a
better
tener que ni despertarnos muy temprano, ni
time
acostarnos muy
frame,
tarde.
not too early in
Vamos
the
a hacer
morning, not too late in
una,
the evening. We will have
sesión específica con las diferentes
specific
regiones que
sessions
tenemos
with
acá,
the multiple
y van a
regions
también
here,
de ahí tener
and
tareas específicas por cada
then
región.
you will have
Vamos a tener un equipo de
specific
facilitación que va a
or
estar apoyando a Fernando
region-specific
y que va a facilitar
tasks
ese diálogo focalizado
facilitated
por
by
los casos regionales.
Fernando. Again,
Cualquier duda,
this is
consulta siempre por medio de
a
correos, en el cual nos
region-based
estamos comunicando
discussion.
permanentemente, y
You
nuevamente el
have
foro también
our
sirve como un
email
espacio de
as well as
diálogo y
the
aclarar
forum,
cualquier
which can
punto
be
que
used
ustedes
as
tengan junto a Fernando y junto al equipo
to
nuestro
discuss and,
local sur y FAO.
share your thoughts
Muchísimas gracias
with
a todas y
Fernando and
todos.
FAO. Thank you,
Seguimos en
everyone.
contacto y seguimos
We will keep in
trabajando
touch.
en las
We'll
próximas semanas.
keep up working in the coming weeks.
Hasta luego.
Bye.